Welcome back to this latest edition of Insider Knowledge. My name is James, and today we're going to be talking about regulation. When we're talking about regulation, there are three key points as far as you should be concerned. One is the person you're talking to actually regulated? Two, what kind of protection is there in that regulation, especially if it's cross-border? And three, what kind of enforcement is there behind the regulation? So starting with point one, is the person regulated? Our experience is talking to many new clients who have been previously advised by other advisors, is a lot of advisors claim they're regulated and it subsequently transpires that they're not. So how can you actually check that out? Well, if they are regulated and they're in a particular country, most countries now publish the information. So if in the UK, USA for example, you'd be able to go onto the website of the regulator, log on, and you'd be able to access whether the person you're talking to is regulated or not. I've used those two as an example, but in reality that's true of a lot of other countries as well. Two, the protection behind regulation. Well, there's regulation and there's regulation. There are regulators and then there are regulators. Now, if you're living in a country that has a major stock market, I would suggest that you've got pretty good regulation and pretty good protection behind that regulation. If you don't, and you live in another country, I won't give any particular examples, but let's say someone down in the Middle East, yes, there's probably regulation. Yes, they probably are regulated, but in reality, no one's really going to check the regulation or the advice that's actually been given to the clients. Certainly that's our experience to date in 2014. Of course, it's always being improved and changed, but certainly that's the case at the moment. And that's true of a lot of the world outside of the major mature markets. So even where there are countries that say they're regulated, and even where the advisor says they're regulated, then it may not count for a lot. And really that comes on to three, enforcement, the third point, and actually maybe the most important. Unless you've got enforcement of regulation, unless there is some kind of weight and balance check, then regulation is largely irrelevant. So there are countries in the European Union, again I won't name them, that have regulators and are regulated, but there is absolutely no enforcement. Without the enforcement, it means there's no incentive or concern when advisors give good or bad advice. And I think that's absolutely critical. I will mention something else, cross-border. There's a lot of misunderstanding about cross-border. People believe that if you're regulated in one country, say country A, and you're passporting, that's a term we use, passporting your regulation through to another country, country B, that you're covered under regulation or country A regulation. Largely that's just not correct. To be regulated in one country doesn't instantly provide regulation in another country. It allows someone to operate and function in another country, but usually there is no follow through on regulation, and in fact the rules and the law stand in this case, country B, not country A. And there is actually no comeback in country A. So just to be clear, cross-border regulation, and a lot of companies use it, actually doesn't necessarily provide an awful lot of protection, and it certainly doesn't really provide any form of enforcement action against the companies using it. So there you have it, that's regulation. My own advice to you would be ideally try and get advice from a country, in a country, from a regulated advisor in that country. That would be my first option every time. My second option would be that if you can't do that, or if you're talking about a product, let's say a UK pension outside the UK in another country and you need a specialist, then my second option would be to use a specialist in the country from which the pension was located. Third option, and probably my final option, would be to use a firm in a mature market that's based in a mature market, call it country A, that is passporting through to another country, country B. Outside of those three options, personally, you might as well not worry or bother about the person who's giving you the advice or whether they're regulated, because frankly there's certainly no enforcement and there's probably no protection for you. Anyway, thanks for watching the latest edition of Insider Knowledge. There's always more information on our website, and there is actually a blog about regulation. Please remember to rate, comment, subscribe, and be sure to join me again for the next edition of Insider Knowledge. Thanks very much.